Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Ventress 6 looked impressive from orbit. All gleaming spires and reinforced architecture sprawled across rust-colored plateaus. The kind of installation that screamed prestige and excellence. Up close, though? Up close, it was a beautiful disaster, wrapped in bureaucratic red tape and held together by the sheer stubbornness of species who couldn't agree on what constituted up in zero gravity. Lieutenant Amara stood at the edge of the main training grounds, arms folded, watching what could generously be called a drill exercise. Less generously, it could be called a mobile catastrophe with fur, scales, and feathers. "Left! I said left!" Wing Commander Brethos screeched from his elevated platform, all four of his arms gesticulating wildly, like he was trying to manually restart the universe. The Athrix was an impressive sight, standing nearly 3 meters tall with bronze plumage that caught the double sunlight. His wings partially spread in what Amara had learned was the avian equivalent of throwing your hands up in exasperation. The cadets, and oh, what a collection they were, stumbled over each other in a formation that looked less like a military unit and more like a bar fight in slow motion. A Lunari cub with silver-gray fur crashed into a scaleth, who hissed and skittered sideways, which caused a chain reaction that ended with a Gromac face-planting into the dust. Amara didn't even blink. She'd seen worse. Barely, but she'd seen worse. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Brethos continued. And honestly, the guy had a point. You are supposed to be the future of interstellar defense. You are supposed to be warriors. Instead, you are a mess? Amara offered helpfully from her spot 30 meters away. Brethos's head swiveled toward her with a speed that would have given most humans whiplash. His amber eyes narrowed. "Lieutenant Amara, how kind of you to provide commentary. Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate how humans handle such situations." There it was, that tone, the one that said, "You're only here because some bureaucrat thought diversity quotas were a good idea, and I think your species discovered fire last week." Amara had been at the academy for exactly 6 weeks, and in those 6 weeks, she'd heard every variation of humans are too soft, humans are too emotional, humans lack the proper biology for real combat, and the ever-popular humans aren't evolutionarily designed for military discipline. That last one always made her laugh, considering humans had been perfecting the art of organized violence for millennia, while half these species were still figuring out agriculture. But she didn't say that. Instead, she smiled, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and said, "I'm just observing, Wing Commander. Learning your methods." "Our methods," Brethos said, puffing his chest feathers out, "have produced the finest warriors in known space for 3,000 standard cycles. They are tested, proven, and effective." Amara glanced back at the training ground where a small fire had somehow started. Clearly. The wing commander's beak clicked in irritation, but before he could respond, the alarm for the midday break sounded, a melodic chime that seemed far too peaceful for a military installation. The cadets immediately broke formation, which wasn't saying much since they barely had one to begin with, and scattered toward the mess hall like someone had announced free food, which, technically, someone had. Brethos deflated slightly, his wings drooping. "Dismissal was in 3 minutes," he muttered. 3 minutes! They cannot even wait 3 minutes. Amara almost felt bad for him. Almost. Tough group? Tough? Brethos turned to her fully, and up close She could see the tiny stress lines around his eyes, the slightly ruffled feathers at his neck. "Lieutenant, I have trained 18 cohorts. 18. I have never, in all my cycles, encountered a group so fundamentally incapable of basic cooperation. They fight amongst themselves constantly. They cannot maintain formation. They cannot follow simple instructions. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that individually they show promise, real promise. But together?" He made a gesture with two of his hands that was probably very rude in Athric's culture. "Together, they are useless." "Which ones are the worst?" Amara asked, genuine curiosity coloring her voice. Brethos didn't even hesitate. "Squad Theta 9, 5 cubs, all from different species, all seemingly designed by the universe to be incompatible." He started walking toward the administrative building, and Amara fell into step beside him. "There's Quillen, Lunari, pack species, naturally hierarchical. Normally, that would be fine, except he has authority issues. Refuses to follow orders he doesn't agree with. Constantly challenges everyone. Thinks he knows better than his instructors." "So he's a teenager," Amara said. Brethos looked at her blankly. "He is a 16-cycle juvenile, yes." "Same thing," Amara grinned. "Who else?" "Ven, Scaleth, reptilian species with heightened sensory perception, which would be an asset except he freezes completely when overwhelmed. Put him in any high-stress scenario, and he might as well be a statue. We've had to extract him from 3 different exercises because he simply stopped functioning." Amara nodded slowly, her mind already working. "Sensory overload. Got it. Next?" "Umber, Gromac species, incredibly strong, excellent endurance, and absolutely no coordination whatsoever. He's built like a siege weapon, but moves like a newborn trying to walk. He's injured himself more than any hostile has ever managed to." Brethos sighed, a very human-like sound. "The other 2 are less problematic, but they've been so discouraged by the first 3 that they've essentially given up. Talus, a Fellain, and Grun, a Thuric, both capable, both completely demoralized. They reached the administrative building, a blessedly cool structure with high ceilings and walls covered in commendations and historical imagery. Brethos led her to a conference room where several other instructors were already gathering for their daily debrief. Amara recognized a few. Instructor Velnath, a spider-like arachnus who handled weapons training. Commander Thule, a gelatinous quelm who managed tactical studies. And a handful of others whose names she was still learning. The meeting started like all the others, reports on cadet progress, which exercises needed adjustment, requisition requests for equipment. Boring, bureaucratic stuff that made Amara miss field work with a physical ache. But then they got to the problem children, specifically Squad Theta 9. "They're not improving," Velnath chittered, her mandibles clicking in what Amara had learned was frustration. "If anything, they're getting worse. Quillen started a physical altercation with Ven during obstacle training this morning." "Ven froze again," Brethos added, "right in the middle of a timed run. Quillen got angry, words were exchanged, and Umber tried to separate them, but ended up knocking over 3 equipment racks." "We should wash them out," another instructor said, a Drenix named Qual. "Cut our losses. They're dragging down the entire cohort's performance metrics." Amara had been quietly listening, but that made her sit up. "They're kids." Every head in the room turned toward her. "Excuse me?" Qual's translator gave his words a clipped, offended tone. "They're kids," Amara repeated, meeting his multifaceted eyes without flinching. "What are they? 16? 18 standard cycles?" You're ready to end their careers before they've started because they're not perfect immediately? This is an elite military academy, Brethos said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Not a remedial school. We train warriors, not problem cases. Funny, Amara said, leaning back in her chair. Because from where I'm sitting, you're training individuals who happen to be in the same uniform. Not the same thing as training a unit. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. And I suppose humans do it better? Brethos said, and there it was again. That condescension, that dismissiveness. Your species has been spacefaring for less than 100 cycles. You've been part of the interstellar community for barely 50. And you think you can lecture us on military training? Amara smiled, and this time it was sharp. Yeah, actually I do. Because I've seen human units with less training than these cubs perform better in actual combat situations. And you want to know why? Enlighten us, Brethos said, spreading all 4 arms wide in a gesture that was definitely mocking. Because we don't just teach people to follow orders. We teach them why the orders matter. We teach them to trust each other. We make them into more than just individuals who happen to be standing in the same place. We make them into something that functions as one unit with many parts. She leaned forward, her gray eyes intense. Your cubs aren't failing because they're incompetent. They're failing because you're treating them like broken parts instead of a machine that needs assembly. The room was silent. Somewhere in the building, Amara could hear the muffled sounds of cadets in the mess hall, the hum of environmental systems, the distant rumble of a transport landing. Then Brethos laughed. It was a harsh, cawing sound that made several instructors flinch. This is Rich, the human, who has been here less than 2 moon cycles, thinks she can fix what we cannot. Tell me, Lieutenant, what makes you so confident? Give me 2 weeks, Amara said. Give me Squad Theta 9 for 2 weeks, and I'll have them functioning as a unit. 2 weeks? Brethos's eyes gleamed with something that looked like malicious amusement. And what happens when you fail? Then I'll admit human methods don't work here, and I'll keep my mouth shut for the rest of my assignment. Amara shrugged. But when I succeed, you're going to sit through a full presentation on human training techniques and actually listen. When you succeed, Brethos repeated, tasting the words like they were rotten fruit. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his beak. The kind of smile that predators gave right before they pounced. Very well, Lieutenant Amara. You have your 2 weeks. Squad Theta 9 is yours as of tomorrow morning. I'll inform them of their new instructor. The way he said instructor made it clear he meant something closer to babysitter or possibly victim. Amara stood, extending her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Brethos looked at it for a moment, then gripped it with one of his taloned hands. His grip was strong enough to be uncomfortable, a little power play that she ignored completely. 2 weeks, she said. Watch and learn, Wing Commander. As she left the conference room, she heard Velnath chittering softly to Thule. The human is either very brave or very stupid. With humans, Thule burbled back, it's usually both. Amara grinned to herself as she walked down the corridor. They had no idea what they'd just agreed to. None of them did. Because the thing about humans, the thing that the wider universe kept underestimating, was that they'd spent their entire existence learning how to make families out of strangers, how to build loyalty across genetic lines, how to create units that functioned on trust instead of just instinct. These instructors saw a group of incompatible species and gave up. Amara saw potential. She found Squad Theta 9's file in the system that evening. reading through their profiles in her small quarters. Quillen, son of a pack leader, sent to the academy to prove himself, but clearly carrying the weight of those expectations like chains. Ven, gifted with incredible sensory abilities, but no training on how to manage the overwhelming input. Umber, strong as anything but moving through a world that wasn't built for his size or strength. Talus and Grun, both competent but beaten down by the constant failure of their squad. Yeah, she could work with this. The next morning, she met them at Training Ground Beta 5 at 0600 hours. They were already there, standing in something that might charitably be called a line, if you squinted and had a very generous definition of geometry. Quillen stood with his arms crossed, his wolf-like features arranged in an expression of supreme annoyance. Ven was twitching slightly, his scales catching the early morning light. Umber loomed behind them, trying to make himself smaller and failing. Talus and Grun stood slightly apart, their body language screaming defeat. "Morning," Amara said, stopping about 3 meters in front of them. She was in standard human military fatigues, nothing fancy, nothing intimidating, just practical clothing and a calm demeanor. "You're the human," Quillen said. It wasn't a question, and it definitely wasn't friendly. "Lieutenant Amara," she confirmed, "I'm your new instructor for the next 2 weeks." "Wonderful," Quillen said, his voice dripping with sarcasm that apparently translated perfectly across species. "Another instructor who's going to yell at us for not being good enough, not following orders fast enough, not being whatever impossible standard they've decided we should meet. Can't wait." Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down, right there on the dusty ground, cross-legged, looking up at the 5 confused cadets. "So," she said conversationally, "why do you think you're failing?" The cubs exchanged glances. This was clearly not what they'd expected. "Because we're not good enough?" Ven offered quietly, his forked tongue flicking nervously. "Wrong answer," Amara said. "Try again." "Because we don't work well together," Talus said, her feline features uncertain. "Getting warmer, but still not quite right." Amara picked up a small stone, turning it over in her hands. "Here's what I think. I think you're failing because nobody's ever actually taught you how to be a team. They've taught you individual skills. They've taught you to follow orders. They've taught you to be good little soldiers. But nobody's taught you why any of that matters or how to actually function as a unit instead of 5 separate people wearing the same uniform." Quillen's ears flicked forward despite himself. "And you're going to teach us that? In 2 weeks?" "I'm going to try," Amara said simply. "But here's the thing. I can't do it alone. You have to actually want this to work. You have to be willing to trust me, trust each other, and trust the process. Even when it seems weird. Especially when it seems weird." "Why would you even bother?" Grun buzzed, his insectoid voice carrying a note of genuine confusion. "We're washouts. Everyone knows it." Amara stood up, dusting off her pants. "Because I've seen what happens when units don't trust each other. I've seen good people die because they didn't know how to work together when it mattered. And I'll be damned if I let that happen to a group of cubs who have potential but just haven't had the right training." She looked at each of them in turn, her expression serious. "So here's how this is going to work. For the next 2 weeks, you're going to do things my way, human way. Some of it's going to seem stupid. Some of it's going to seem pointless. But at the end of 2 weeks, if you've actually committed to the process, you'll be functioning as a unit. That's my promise to you." "And if we don't want to do it your way?" Quillen challenged, his hackles literally rising. Amara smiled. "Then you wash out, and I go back to my regular assignment. Your choice, cubs. What's it going to be?" The 5 cadets looked at each other. A silent conversation seemed to pass between them, the kind that happened when people had suffered together long enough to need no words. Finally, Umber spoke, his voice a deep rumble. "What do we have to lose?" "Exactly," Amara said. "So, who's ready to learn how humans build a pack?" Week 1 started with confusion, which Amara had expected. What she hadn't expected was the sheer amount of side-eye 5 different species could generate when she told them their first exercise. "You want us to... what?" Quillen's ears were flat against his skull, a sure sign of canine bewilderment. "Tell me about yourselves," Amara repeated, settling onto the ground again like she had all the time in the world. "Not your combat stats or your species advantages. You. What you like. What scares you. Why you're here." Ven's scales rippled with what looked like anxiety. This is military training?" "This is trust training," Amara said. "Can't have a unit without trust. Can't have trust without knowing who you're trusting. So, who wants to go first?" Silence. The kind of uncomfortable silence that made you want to fill it with literally anything just to make it stop. "Fine," Quillen finally said, flopping down across from her with the dramatic flair only teenagers could muster. "I'm Quillen, Lunari. My father is pack leader of the Northern Territories. He sent me here because I'm the youngest of 6, and apparently I need to prove I'm not useless." His voice was bitter, sharp enough to cut. "I'm here because I have to be, not because I want to be." "Thank you," Amara said, and she meant it. That took guts. "Who's next?" Slowly, one by one, the others sat. Ven went next, his voice barely above a whisper, as he explained how his heightened senses made everything too much sometimes. Too loud, too bright, too everything. Umber admitted he'd always been clumsy, always too big for spaces designed for smaller species, always breaking things without meaning to. Talus confessed she'd joined to escape an arranged bonding contract. Grun buzzed softly about being the first of his hive to attempt military service. By the time they finished, the double suns had climbed higher in the sky, and something in the air between them had shifted. Not much, but enough. "Good," Amara said, standing and dusting herself off. "Now we run." "Finally," Quillen muttered. "Something normal." Oh, if only he knew. Amara led them to the track, a standard 5-kilometer loop around the academy grounds. Simple enough, except she didn't have them run separately or race each other. She had them run together, at the pace of the slowest member, which, unfortunately for everyone's pride, was Umber. "This is ridiculous," Quillen complained after the first kilometer, his Lunari physiology clearly built for speed, being forced into a lumbering jog. "I could lap this course 3 times in the time it's taking us to finish once." "Then you'd finish alone," Amara said, jogging alongside them without breaking a sweat. Question. In combat, do you fight alone or as a unit? As a unit, but no buts. You move at the speed of your unit. That means nobody gets left behind. That means the strong help the weak. That means you're only as fast as your slowest member, so you'd better figure out how to make your slowest member faster. She let that sink in for half a lap. "Umber," she called out, "why are you slow?" The Grommack huffed, his breathing labored. "Built for strength, not speed." "Wrong. You're slow because you're carrying too much tension in your shoulders, and your stride is inefficient for your body type. Quillen, you're fast, and you've got good instincts for movement. Help him." Quillen looked like he'd rather eat glass, but something in Amara's expression, or maybe it was the memory of admitting his father thought he was useless, made him drop back next to Umber. "Your legs are longer than mine," Quillen said grudgingly. "You shouldn't be this slow. You're taking too many small steps. Try lengthening your stride. And stop hunching. You're making yourself fight your own body." Umber tried. It didn't work immediately, but by the third lap, his pace had picked up slightly. Not much, but enough that Quillen's advice had mattered. "Better," Amara said. "Ven, what do you notice about the group's rhythm right now?" The Skylith had been quiet, running in the middle of the pack. "We're not synchronized. Everyone's breathing at different rates. Footfalls are scattered." "Good observation. Think that matters?" "I don't know." In human military training, we use something called cadence, rhythmic chants or songs that help everyone move together. Creates unity of movement, unity of breath, unity of purpose. She grinned. Also makes boring runs less boring. Want to try? What followed was possibly the most absurd hour of training anyone at the academy had ever witnessed. Amara taught them a simple, human running cadence. Nothing fancy, just a call and response rhythm that kept everyone's feet hitting the ground at the same time. It sounded awful at first. Quillen's growling voice clashed with Grunn's buzzing harmonics. Ven kept losing the beat. Umber was too out of breath to chant and run simultaneously. But Amara kept at it, adjusting the pace, simplifying the words, making it work for 5 completely different physiologies. By the end of the week, something impossible had happened. They finished the 5-kilometer run together, at the same pace, in rhythm, and faster than Umber had ever managed alone. "How?" Umber panted afterward, collapsing in a heap. "How am I faster?" "Because you're not running alone," Amara said. "You're being pulled along by the momentum of the unit. That's what happens when you move together. The collective becomes stronger than the individual parts." Day 4 brought the trust falls, which went about as well as expected. Quillen refused to fall backward into Umber's arms because pack hierarchy doesn't work that way. Ven nearly had a panic attack when it was his turn. Talus caught Grun just fine, but Grun's chitin made him heavier than expected, and she dropped him. "This is stupid," Quillen announced, his arms crossed. "This isn't combat training. This isn't making us better warriors. This is just weird human bonding nonsense." Amara had been waiting for this. She'd actually expected it sooner. "You're right. It's not combat training. It's something more important. It's learning that the person next to you will catch you when you fall. Because here's the thing, Quillen. I can teach you to shoot, to fight, to follow orders. But if you don't trust the people in your unit, you'll hesitate. That hesitation? That'll get you killed. That'll get them killed." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I know trust doesn't come naturally to you. Pack hierarchy means you're always watching your back, always proving yourself. But this isn't a pack. This is a squad. Different rules. Here, you don't earn your place by being the strongest or the fastest. You earn it by being reliable, by being someone your team knows they can count on." Quillen's ears twitched. His jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. "I'm not asking you to like them," Amara continued. "I'm asking you to trust them. There's a difference. Can you do that?" The Lunari cub looked at his squad, really looked at them. Ven, who was still trembling slightly. Umber, who'd caught everyone without complaint, despite being called clumsy his whole life. Talus and Grun, who'd been trying so hard to keep everything together. "I can try," he said finally. "Good enough," Amara said. "Let's go again." By day 6, something had changed. Amara noticed it during the obstacle course, the one that had caused their massive fight the week before. They were moving through it again, and this time, when Ven froze at the high-stimulus section with flashing lights and loud noises, Quillen didn't yell at him. Instead, he moved to Ven's side and growled, "Focus on my voice. Just my voice. Block everything else out. We're going through together." And they did. Week 2 started with Amara introducing what she called adaptive drills, which was a fancy way of saying she threw problems at them that didn't have obvious solutions and watched them figure it out. "Your objective," she announced on day 8, pointing to a structure that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated physics, "is to get everyone to the top of that tower. You have 30 minutes. Go." The tower was 12 meters tall, with handholds spaced irregularly, and several sections that required climbing skills none of them had mastered yet. Worse, some of the handholds were designed for species with different body types: narrow grips for small, dexterous hands, wide bars for species with strength, textured sections for those with climbing claws. "This is impossible," Talus said, her feline eyes narrowing as she assessed the structure. "Look at it. Umber can't fit through that middle section, and Grun's limbs aren't designed for those vertical handholds." "So figure it out," Amara said, settling onto a nearby bench with a hydration pack. "You've got 29 minutes now." What happened next was, well, it wasn't pretty. Not at first. They argued about approach. Quillen wanted to send the lightest members up first to establish anchor points. Ven suggested using their combined reach to create a living ladder. Umber just stood there looking miserable because he knew he was the problem. Too heavy, too large, too clumsy. But then something clicked. "Wait," Grun buzzed, his antennae twitching in what Amara had learned meant he was thinking hard. "What if we don't all climb the same way? What if we use our differences instead of trying to work around them?" "Explain," Quillen said, and there was no hostility in his voice anymore. Just genuine curiosity. "Umber is strong. He can lift any of us. Talus has claws and balance. She can climb sections we can't. Ven has the longest reach. I can stick to surfaces with my leg adhesion. Quillen is fast and can probably jump gaps we'd have to climb around." "So we build a chain," Ven said slowly, his scales rippling with something that might have been excitement. "Each person does what they're best at." They tried it. Umber planted himself at the base and literally threw Talus up to the first platform. She climbed to the second level and secured a rope they'd been given. Grun used his adhesion to crawl up a section that would have been impossible for anyone else, creating anchor points. Quillen made impossible leaps between platforms, his lunarii agility finally an asset instead of a point of frustration. Ven, with his long reach and newfound confidence, bridged gaps that would have stopped anyone else. When they got to the section that Umber couldn't fit through, they didn't leave him behind. They found a different path, a wider route that took longer, but meant everyone made it to the top, together. They finished with 90 seconds to spare, all 5 of them standing on the top platform, breathing hard and looking at each other with something that might have been pride. "Not bad," Amara called up to them. "Now get down. You've got 15 minutes before the next drill." By day 10, other instructors had started watching. Amara noticed them gathering at the edges of the training ground, observing with expressions ranging from skeptical to curious. Brethos was among them, his forearms crossed and his feathers ruffled in what she'd learned meant he was irritated, but trying not to show it. "Good. Let them watch." She ran the squad through combat scenarios, simulated ambushes, rescue operations, defensive positions, nothing they hadn't done before, but now they were doing it differently. They weren't 5 individuals following orders. They were a unit that anticipated each other's moves, covered each other's weaknesses, and moved like a single organism with multiple parts. When Quillen went down with a simulated injury during a drill, Ven and Umber didn't hesitate. They created a protective position around him while Talus and Grun pushed forward to neutralize the threat. Then they carried him out together, maintaining defensive formation the entire time. "Who taught them that?" she heard one instructor mutter. "The humans been doing something different," another replied. "I don't know what, but it's working." Day 12 brought the announcement that made Amara's stomach drop. The quarterly combat readiness assessment was in 3 days. All squads would compete in a grueling multi-stage course designed to test everything they'd learned. It was the Academy's way of ranking performance, identifying promising cadets, and, not coincidentally, weeding out those who weren't making the cut. "We're not ready," Ven said that evening, his anxiety making his scales shift through colors. "The other squads have been training for months. We've had 2 weeks." "We've had 2 weeks of focused training," Amara corrected. "They've had months of doing things the same way. You've learned to adapt. That matters." "Does it matter enough?" Quillen asked, and the vulnerability in his voice was startling. He'd come so far from the cocky, defensive cub she'd met 2 weeks ago. "What if we fail? What if we let you down?" Amara looked at each of them. These 5 impossibly different beings who'd somehow become something resembling a team. "Listen to me. In 2 weeks, you've gone from barely being able to run together to functioning as a legitimate unit. You've learned to trust each other. You've learned to use your differences as strengths instead of treating them as weaknesses. Win or lose, you've already succeeded where it matters." "But winning would be nice," Grun buzzed hopefully. "Winning would be very nice," Amara agreed with a grin. "So let's talk strategy." The day of the assessment arrived with typical Ventress 6 weather: hot, dusty, and unforgiving. 20 squads gathered at the starting line, a mix of species and training styles. Amara spotted several squads that moved with mechanical precision, their formations perfect, their responses to commands instant. They looked like professionals. Her squad looked like, well, like a group of misfits who'd learned to tolerate each other. But Amara knew better. She'd seen what they could do when it mattered. The course was brutal. Stage 1, a 10-kilometer run with full gear through rough terrain. Stage 2, a combat simulation with live-fire training weapons. Stage 3, a rescue scenario where squads had to extract a wounded dummy from a hostile environment while under suppressed fire. Stage 4, a puzzle room that required coordination and problem-solving under time pressure. Stage 5, a final sprint to the finish with increasingly difficult obstacles. Brethos had outdone himself. Amara watched from the observation deck as he gleefully added last-minute complications, extra obstacles, tighter time limits, additional variables that the Cubs hadn't trained for. He was trying to make them fail, to prove that human methods were inferior. The starting horn blared. Squad Theta 9 moved out at their practiced pace, not the fastest, but steady, and together. Other squads sprinted ahead, their faster members leaving slower ones behind. Amara bit her lip, trusting the process. Stage 1 separated the pack quickly. Squads that had prioritized individual speed found themselves fragmented when terrain got rough. 3 squads had to stop and regroup when their slowest members fell too far behind. Squad Theta 9? They maintained formation, using the techniques they'd practiced. When Umber struggled on an uphill section, the others adjusted their pace, and Quillen ran alongside him, keeping his rhythm steady with that ridiculous cadence they'd been chanting for 2 weeks. They finished Stage 1 in 8th place. Not great, but not terrible. Stage 2 was where things got interesting. The combat simulation required squads to move through an urban environment while engaging targets and avoiding simulated enemy fire. Most squads approached it with rigid tactics, standard formations, predictable movements. Squad Theta 9 adapted on the fly. They used Ven's enhanced senses to detect ambush points before walking into them. They leveraged Umber's strength to create mobile cover. Quillen's speed became an asset for flanking maneuvers. Talus and Grun covered angles others missed. They finished Stage 2 in 5th place. Climbing. Stage 3, the rescue scenario. This was where Amara saw something that made her throat tight. Quillen took a simulated hit protecting Ven. Instead of leaving him or slowing down, they adapted. Umber carried both Quillen and the rescue dummy while the others provided cover. It cost them time, but they all made it out. 4th place, Stage 4, the puzzle room. This was where squads who'd focused purely on physical training struggled. The room required coordination, communication, and creative thinking. Squad Theta 9 moved through it like they'd been doing it for years, each member contributing their unique perspective. Grun's compound eyes spotted patterns others missed. Ven's sensory abilities detected hidden mechanisms. Quillen's quick thinking connected solutions. Talus's steady hands executed delicate tasks. Umber's strength moved obstacles. They finished in record time. 2nd place overall going into the final stage. The final sprint was chaos incarnate. Obstacles that required teamwork. Walls too high for individuals, but manageable for groups. Gaps that needed trust to cross. Amara watched as the leading squad, a group of Drenics who'd been training together for 8 months, moved with mechanical efficiency. They were good, really good, but they weren't adaptable. When an obstacle appeared that wasn't part of the standard course, Brethos's last-minute addition, a wall that required lifting the heaviest member over first, the Drenics squad faltered. Their training hadn't prepared them for this. They wasted precious seconds arguing about protocol. Squad Theta 9 hit the same obstacle 30 seconds behind them. Didn't even hesitate. Umber went up first, lifted by combined effort, then reached down to pull the others up one by one. Textbook human tactics. Unorthodox by Academy standards. Effective as hell. They crossed the finish line in 3rd place, 9 seconds behind 2nd and 18 seconds behind 1st. 3rd place, out of 20 squads. After 2 weeks of training, the 5 cubs collapsed in a heap, exhausted, bruised, and grinning like idiots. The assembly hall was packed. Every instructor, every cadet, every administrative official who could find an excuse to attend had shown up for the assessment results ceremony. Awards would be given, rankings announced, and exceptional performances recognized. Squad Theta 9 stood in formation with the other squads, looking significantly less polished than their peers. Their uniforms were dustier, their postures less rigid, but there was something different about them. They stood close together, shoulders almost touching, like they were drawing strength from proximity. Amara watched from the instructor section, trying to ignore the weight of Brethos's glare burning into the side of her head. The Commandant, Wulmira, an ancient quelm whose gelatinous form shifted colors as she spoke, announced the rankings. 3rd place went to Squad Theta 9, and the applause that followed was complicated. Some clapped enthusiastically. Others offered polite acknowledgement. A few instructors looked downright offended that the problem cubs had placed at all. When the ceremony ended, Brethos didn't waste time. He strode to the center of the hall, his 4 arms spread wide, his voice carrying to every corner. I have a question that demands answering. The room fell silent. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't how these things went. Squad Theta 9, he continued, his amber eyes fixed on the 5 cubs who suddenly looked very small and very young. 2 weeks ago, you were the worst performing unit in Academy history. You could not follow orders. You could not maintain formation. You could not function as soldiers. He paused, and his beak curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Today, you outperformed squads with months more training. Today, you demonstrated capabilities that frankly shocked many of us. Quillen's ears flattened nervously. Ven's scales rippled with anxiety. So I ask you, Brethos said, and his voice dropped to something dangerous. Who taught them discipline? The words echoed in the sudden silence. Every eye in the hall turned to Squad Theta 9. Amara tensed, ready to step in, ready to defend them from whatever was about to happen. But then something unexpected occurred. Every single cub in Squad Theta 9 stood taller. Not much, just a subtle straightening of spines, a squaring of shoulders, a lifting of chins. The kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Quillen stepped forward, half a pace. Permission to speak, Wing Commander? Brethos looked startled, but nodded. You asked who taught us discipline, Quillen said, his voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes on him. Lieutenant Amara did, but not the way you think. He glanced back at his squad, his pack, Amara realized with a sudden tightness in her chest, and they nodded encouragement. She didn't teach us to follow orders without thinking. She taught us to understand why orders matter. She didn't teach us to be individuals who happen to wear the same uniform. She taught us to be a unit that functions as one. Ven stepped up beside him, his scales settling into calm patterns. She taught us that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. That being the fastest or the strongest doesn't matter if you leave your unit behind. She taught us that discipline isn't about fear. Umber rumbled, his massive form somehow gentle. It's about purpose. We're disciplined because we're fighting for each other, not because we're afraid of punishment. Talus and Grun moved forward to complete the line. She taught us human concepts, Talus said softly. Things like, we've got your 6, and no one left behind. She taught us that a unit is only as strong as its weakest member, Grun buzzed. So we make sure there are no weak members. We lift each other up. Quillen looked directly at Brethos, and there was no challenge in his expression anymore. Just honest conviction. You asked who taught us discipline, Wing Commander. The answer is, she taught us discipline through loyalty. And we learned it because, for the first time, someone looked at us and saw potential instead of problems. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Commandant Wulmira shifted forward, her gelatinous body catching the light. Wing Commander Brethos, Lieutenant Amara, please approach. Amara moved forward, her heart hammering. This could go very badly. Brethos joined her, his feathers ruffled, his expression unreadable. Wing Commander? Wulmira said, her voice like wind chimes. You have trained warriors with precision and skill for many cycles. Your methods produce excellent individual fighters. Brethos's chest puffed slightly. However, the Commandant continued, the Lieutenant has demonstrated something we have struggled with for generations. The ability to create true unit cohesion across species barriers. To build loyalty that transcends biological imperatives and cultural programming. She turned to address the entire assembly. This academy has produced exceptional warriors, yes, but we have consistently failed to produce exceptional teams. Our squads function through hierarchy and obedience, not through genuine trust. We have mistaken compliance for discipline. Woolmira's form rippled with what might have been amusement. Humans are relatively new to interstellar community. Their technology is adequate, but not exceptional. Their physical capabilities vary, but are generally unremarkable. Yet they possess something we have overlooked: evolutionary experience in creating loyalty across non-genetic lines. She gestured toward Squad Theta 9. These cubs learned in 2 weeks what we have failed to teach in months: that a unit is not a collection of individuals, but a single entity with many parts. That discipline rooted in purpose is stronger than discipline rooted in fear. That chosen loyalty is more powerful than programmed obedience. Brethos looked like he was trying to swallow something unpleasant. Several other instructors shifted uncomfortably. "Lieutenant Amara," Woolmira said, "I am offering you a permanent position here. We need you to develop a new training curriculum, one that incorporates these human concepts into our existing framework. Will you accept?" Amara glanced at Squad Theta 9, at these 5 impossible cubs who'd somehow become a real team. "On one condition," she said, "Squad Theta 9 stays together. They've earned the right to continue as a unit." "Agreed." Brethos made a sound that might have been a sigh, or might have been choking. "I suppose human methods have some merit," he managed, each word sounding like it physically hurt. Perhaps we could learn from each other." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close enough. The assembly was dismissed, cadets filtering out in clusters, buzzing with conversation. Squad Theta 9 remained, standing together like they weren't quite sure what had just happened. Amara walked over to them. "You did good, cubs." "We learned from the best," Quillen said, and then did something that surprised everyone. He saluted. Perfect form, the kind that spoke of genuine respect rather than mere obedience. The others followed suit. "No one left behind, Lieutenant," Quillen said quietly. Amara returned the salute, her throat tight. "No one left behind," she agreed. As she watched them leave together, walking in step without even thinking about it, Umber making a joke that made Ven's scales flash with amusement colors, Quillen playfully shoving Talus, who swatted him back, Grun buzzing contentedly, she thought about what Woolmira had said. Humans kept surprising the wider universe. Not with superior technology, not with physical superiority, but with something simpler and more powerful: the stubborn, impossible, beautiful insistence that everyone, regardless of species, biology, or background, deserved a pack to belong to. And sometimes that was enough to change everything.